Alright, so I'm going to show you how to get to the sync plates on an FG model CED video displayer. So basically you can watch one of my service videos. It'll show you the same thing on how to take it apart, because you have to lubricate the turntable shaft in order to make it spin freely. But just for the purpose of this video, I'm going to show you again here. Basically what you want to do is you want to put the player on its side, remove all the screws that are on the bottom of the player. They'll look like that, and then there's going to be those three on the back. So on the back of the player there'll be 1, 2, 3 screws. So you take those three out and all the ones on the bottom, and then you can lift the cover off. Be gentle when lifting the cover, but you can usually lift up the back a little bit and then slide it forward and it will come off. So I got the cover down there. But so once you get the cover off, you're going to have 4 screws holding this top circuit board on. So there'll be 1, 2, and then 3, 4 over here. Sometimes there's a ground strap attached to this one, sometimes not. And then once you get all those off, you can just simply flip this over. And you want to make sure the player is unplugged when you're doing all this, because you don't want to inadvertently touch something to something and create magic smoke. Magic smoke bad. Don't make magic smoke. And then there'll be this bar on here. Sometimes there's like a little wheelie doolie bob that comes off, and then sometimes this thing will actually be slid into a slot. It all depends on which model you're working on, but usually they just lift up on this side, and then if there's a slot over there, then you got to pull it off the slot. But then you can set that aside. You can set the little wheelie aside if it's got one. And then your next step is going to be these 2 screws back here. If you're unsure about your work area and you don't want to risk damaging your stylus, I would suggest take your stylus out right now. If you've got one in there, you just push back on this little thing with the arrow on it, and then your door will lift open. And then there's usually this little handle, and you can just lift straight up. Set that off to the side, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to take these out. I highly recommend electric screwdriver. Makes things go so much faster, especially if you have to take this apart a dozen times, which sometimes you do when adjusting the sync plates, because if you don't have the gauge, then it's hard to know exactly where it's going to be. But then once you get that off, this will lift back like that, and then slide this end out, and then you can pull that out, and the whole thing will just flip over. Oh, stay. Okay, that gives you access to the platter. Then for the platter, it's going to have these 2 screws right here and right here. They are a very soft metal screw. I don't know if they're aluminum or what the deal is, but more often than not, if you're using the wrong kind of screwdriver, they will strip. You want a number 1, I think. Hold on, I got one right here. It's a number 1. So you want a number 1 Phillips head screwdriver. And what I usually do for the first time when you're removing them, set your screwdriver in there, position it, and then give it a good whack on top of something. You're not going to damage anything by giving it a good whack. And then that'll set the screwdriver into the screw, so then when you go to turn it, it won't strip. Usually. It could still strip. Who knows? Depends on how badly it's in there. But I do offer these screws. If you do end up stripping them out, then you got to get a drill, and you got to drill the screw out and then pull little pieces of the screw out. And then I have replacements, so they're like $1 for 2 screws. Alright, so then once you get those 2 screws out, then this whole mess will pop up. And there's actually several different kinds of these. There's one like this where it's got this little like rubber washer thing, and then there's also ones like this where the little rubber washer is actually plastic and in two pieces on both sides. They basically operate the same way. The one with the rubber washer is actually a lot easier to use in my opinion, but it all depends on what you got really. Take those out. Don't lose this little spring in the middle. I saved all these cups from like dessert containers like Jello or whatever, and they work perfect for storing your little screws and stuff so you don't lose things. Alright, so then once you get that off, you can just lift the platter straight out, and it's going to hit this bar a little bit, so you're just going to have to kind of move it around the bar and then continue to lift it straight out like that, and your belt will be underneath there. And then on the bottom of the platter there's going to be this little ball bearing, which is actually kind of shaped like a bullet, like it's this long. It'll be like this long, and it's kind of round on one end, and yeah. So sometimes that'll fall out, don't lose it. Sometimes it'll actually stay in the hole, and you'll have to get a stick magnet and retrieve it. Yeah, so this platter I've already had off and marked. I just tested this platter and it worked perfectly, so this is a good platter. This is a 153309. And this belt worked. But yeah, so these are your sink plates. And then you're going to have this tool, or I should say, they make this tool. There's not very many of them out there. I mean, you could make one yourself if you have extra platters. Hard part is getting it to go in straight, because you see that ball bearing there wants to like turn and rotate and stuff. So you gotta get that to go in, and then there's actually another ball bearing below it, and so that's why sometimes it won't seat all the way. You gotta kind of, sometimes you gotta kind of spin it so it'll drop down. There it goes. So once it drops in, it should spin freely like that. And on this one, you can see there's actually a pretty wide, well, actually not too wide of a gap. So this platter comes with a little feeler gauge and instructions. Pardon my camera. Nope, this is the wrong package. So this is actually a turntable check strobe, and if you're getting a color imbalance, you can put this turntable check strobe on there like a disc and spin it, like power the player up. And if you look under a fluorescent lamp that's running at 60 Hertz, if the turntable is running at proper speed, 450 RPMs, the wedges will be stationary. If the wedges move clockwise or counterclockwise, indicate speed is greater than 450 RPM. Wedges remain stationary for short periods of time. Movement of wedges corresponds to loss of color, horizontal TV. Yeah. So you can actually print this check strobe off of the CED Magic website, and Tom has instructions on there on how to use it. This is just the official RCA one is all. It's tool number 153331. It's not what I was looking for though. Oh, this baggie, I guess. So inside this baggie, we're going to have instructions and a feeler gauge. So this is the feeler gauge. And the feeler gauge has two little sticks on the opposite sides. One's going to be really thin and one is a little bit fatter. And so what you want to do the .05 gauge must not pass between the sink plates and the magnetic strip, and the .15 gauge must pass between the plates and the magnetic strip. So the fat end of the gauge should not pass between the magnet and the sink plate, which for this side it does. But I noticed this one was much closer. This one does not, but this side should. Hard to get in here. One second, let me brighten this up for you a little bit so you can see what's going on. So if you look between the magnet and the plate, this thin gauge should be able to pass through, like that. But then this fat side should not be able to pass through, which it does. So it's actually, gauge is actually supposed to be closer. The sink plate is actually supposed to be closer. And to adjust them, all you have to do is just kind of grab it and bend it a little bit closer. But now this is also, Tony talked about this in his video, but like this whole assembly with the plates on it can move. Like you see how it wiggles like that? It's hard to tell when I'm holding the camera, but like the whole thing can move. So how accurate is this going to be? Because I was just using this player and it works perfect, but yet this side is pretty much right on. This side actually needs to be a little bit closer. Oh, and then I guess it depends on what platter you're using too here. So this platter is actually, well, see, this platter is actually the 156342. Looks like it has the thicker magnet. See, because then when you get to this one, it has a thinner magnet. There's two different thickness of magnets. So this was the 149049, has the thicker magnet. So this is the 149 that I was testing. I want to use the 153309. So put my gauge down in there. Yeah, so it's actually perfect for this side. Both of them, yeah. But then when you flip over to this side, it's actually too big because this side has a thicker magnet. And you can probably see it on the thing here. They have two different magnets. There's that magnet. Oh, this one's actually the thinner magnet. I don't know. Anyways, that's how you adjust it. But you probably don't have this special tool to adjust it with. So basically, the way Tony did it was he actually adjusted this whole plate. But what you're supposed to do is bend these in, put your platter back on, spin your platter, and if you don't hear it scraping, take it off and move them closer until you hear it scraping. And then once you hear it scraping, take it off and move them back just a little bit. That way they are as close to the magnet as they can get without actually touching or scraping. Does that make sense? And then you just put everything back together. Okay.